The Security VIP podcast is proud to present a panel discussion in higher education, sponsored by the team at ACRE. Today's starting lineup includes Rick Fox of Colorado Mesa University, Fred Stone of Missouri University of Science and Technology, Danny Anthes of George Mason University, and Chief Jeff Baker of UNC Charlotte. The Security VIP podcast is hosted by Taylor May, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Security VIP podcast, the official podcast of the security industry and home of nothing but the truth. As always, I'm your host, Taylor May. And today is a great day because we are once again hosting a panel discussion with some of the top end users across the nation. Sponsored by the team at ACRE, today we will focus on higher ed and learn about the security challenges being faced on college campuses, how universities are handling COVID-19, where security ranks on the priority ladder, and much, much more. And as someone who firmly believes that end users hold all the power here in the security industry, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our panelists, Rick Fox, Fred Stone, Danny Anthes, and Chief of Police Jeff Baker to the Security VIP podcast today. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Great.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys for hopping on. I've said this countless times here in the industry. You know, as a manufacturer, we can come up with the best product we think is going to work for every single environment. But if I bring it to guys like you and you tell me, Taylor, what the hell is this? This is not going to work in my environment. You guys hold the power. You guys hold the influence in this industry. And that's why we're going to have you guys on this podcast series and talk about higher ed specifically. So let's just get to the chase, man. You know, Danny, I want to start with you, man. Out of Virginia, you're with George Mason University. Let's talk about technology and COVID-19. When we look at the use of technology here in the industry, it's definitely evolved over the years. I'm sure you've seen it evolve from analog to IP, to even key fobs, to touchless now with access control. So all these different methodologies that are changing. But what is one piece of technology that you have either deployed or would like to deploy that you found the most beneficial since COVID-19? Let's hear it.
So for us, it's really around, you sort of hit on it, touchless, right? The next wave. And it's trying to get that deployed, everywhere where we would normally have contact, whether that's at the door, at the cash register, right? We're looking for ways to reduce, those touch interactions that customers have or end users have, whether it's with doors, with cash registers, event attendants. It's trying to get as touchless as we can to help with the spread.
Yeah, touchless is a hot commodity right now, and there's different ways you can do touchless access control. One's with obviously facial recognition. You can do it with a mobile credential now. What about you, Fred? What are you seeing as kind of that one piece of technology for your environment?
We've used heavily the data exchange with RS2 to really tie our system to live data that some of our other partners are using. One of the things that we've been able to do is really modify our access in quick order. So one request that our chief of police made is that we lock doors during the pandemic when we had these kind of reduced populations on campus. And we were able to do that in a day and essentially only allow active students, employees to get in buildings, because he was seeing an influx of folks that shouldn't be on campus just kind of showing up because there were less people on campus. And so we were able to make that accommodation pretty quickly.
Fred, are you finding that I had a conversation with some end users in the healthcare sector, and they're saying, Taylor, we've had to use access control a lot differently since COVID-19, and we've had to protect rooms that hold PPE gear now. So masks, gloves, you name it, all this certain kind of PPE gear. Are you finding that kind of same issue now with access control? Are you going to have to protect certain things now that you didn't have to protect prior to COVID-19?
We're not seeing a ton of that, but we definitely have had to use our access control differently since the start of COVID-19. Again, we've done a lot of things to be able to restrict restrict the number of people in rooms so that we maintain social distancing and can really say that we're enforcing that, and ensure that when people are quarantined, if we have to restrict them to be off campus.
Great to hear. And both Fred and Danny are RS2 clients, but let's hear from a counter of RS2 still underneath the ACRE umbrella. So it's still an ACRE company, but Open Options is a competitor of RS2. And I would love to hear Chief Baker's thoughts on how he's using Open Options and maybe some new technology over there. Chief, what are you seeing?
Well, one thing I always go back to, and most folks ask me about, is the 30th of April last year, when we actually had an active shooter on campus and murdered 2 of our students and shot 4 other students in a classroom. One thing we did is we had installed over the years. It was about a 2 or 2.5 year process to be able to lock down all exterior doors on 90 plus buildings on campus. And on that day, we were able to deploy that. We can deploy it by pressing one lever in the dispatch center, and it worked. And I can't say enough about how important that is. Although sometimes some folks will say, well, I don't know, is it that important, or what do you think? And I can tell you right now, after having dealing with an active shooter, you never know. They can go into one building, go exit another building, run to another building, depending on how well they know the campus. This happened to be a former student, so he knew the campus real well. He'd been here for a few semesters, and luckily we did contain him, but it worked wonderfully. And I can say that the ability to lock down exterior doors on campuses is, in my opinion, critically important, although it's expensive. I mean, I do get that. It's not cheap. Our chancellor was very supportive when we started this process. Today I'm glad we have it. I think more universities probably should consider deploying this, especially if you're in urban settings. We sit in the city of Charlotte. Charlotte, North Carolina is the 16th largest city in America. So we've got a huge population. Unfortunately, we also have a lot of crime. And, we've had other incidents on campus where we've been able, maybe we didn't lock down all the buildings, but we were able to lock down certain buildings, which we have the ability to do as well. And that was due to certain situations that were occurring in those sectors on campus. So I can't say enough good about that. I'm glad we have it. I'm glad we had it on this day. And, the media was really good to us. Of course, our officers responded wonderfully too. We were in the building within 2 to 3 minutes from receiving the initial call of the active shooter, which is remarkable in and of itself. But the media also didn't beat us up or hurt us, and not that we have to worry about that, but I'm just saying, as far as public opinion goes and reputation, we came out of it really well in the eyes of the media. So,
Yeah, Chief, thank you for sharing that story. And I think the moral of what Chief's just said there, guys, is you have to prepare for the unknown. No one knows what the future may hold, but if you are future-proof, your security system is future-proof, you can at least delay these kind of incidents from happening eventually. And, an active shooter situation, God forbid, you see these all the time now, unfortunately, across the nation. And, here in Texas, Santa Fe ISD is one of my school districts down there in Houston. And when you talk about Santa Fe, people think Santa Fe, New Mexico, right? They don't think Santa Fe, Texas. And a little 5-school district that you would never think it would experience an active shooter event, and it happened. And the point here, guys, is, we have to be proactive. We have to implement this proactive mindset when it comes to security, because if we're reactive, you can be in the nicest of neighborhood, you can be the nicest of environment, but it can still happen anywhere with your students, your staff, pedophiles, whatever it may be. These certain offenders that just are looking to do harm. We got to prevent for that. So, Mr. Fox, you are the Vanderbilt guy. You've run in Vanderbilt, and you're in the beautiful state of Colorado. Like I said earlier, I told you I love that state. My wife and I love that state. But what are you seeing as far as technology since COVID-19? And what kind of technology are you looking to deploy?
So it's interesting, in my area of responsibility, really no new technology. On campus, we have thermal cameras with facial recognition at the entrance to all of our buildings, but IT's managing that. Thankfully, not my problem. I would echo some of what Fred said, in that really my problem has been being able to be nimble and modify circulation into and through buildings as a result of. It's been fun to say, right? The first few months, March on, I regularly responded to emails. Part of my global pandemic pre-plan, I'm able to, lock this door and unlock this door to describe the circulation through the building, which it wasn't, but it was fun to say. And it was nice to have that functionality.
Rick, are you finding that since COVID-19, I like to ask this question because I'm sure all you guys are having this issue. Are you finding that manufacturers are blowing you up with the latest technology that's going to solve all your COVID-19 headaches? What are you seeing?
I'm not. I don't think so. Yeah. No,
Danny's shaking his head over here, so I
there.
was curious what Danny's going to say here.
Yeah, a lot. There's always someone wanting to say, hey, here's a new great toy that we think is going to solve all your problems. And what makes it really interesting is the directions that come from, right? I mean, some reach directly out to me. Some have gone through my first level techs, no idea how they got them. And some have even come down from the senior VP of, hey, this is a great solution. I'm like, we've already looked at it, we're fine. So it's just that for me, it's the myriad of directions these all come in, right? I mean, it's everything from temperature taking at cash registers to different ways to enroll workers. It's, yes, a lot of different products that are coming at you.
So what would you guys propose then, when it came to COVID-19? I'm sure you guys got blown up. I know Danny said he got blown up by a bunch of manufacturers. What would you guys propose? Would you guys rely on certain partners you've already worked with to bring you the latest technology? Would you do the research yourself? How would you respond to manufacturers that are reaching out to you? I mean, what's that message you need to be, I guess, for manufacturers to understand what you guys are going through?
Our first thought at Missouri S&T was really, how can we use the tools that we have right now? Access control takes some time to modify, especially with the number of doors and readers we have. So, we were quick to sort of ask ourselves, how can we use what we have? And so we did come up with one idea to use passback and sort of this occupancy limitation in our research labs, as requested by our vice chancellor of research. And we reached out right away to technical support and said, hey, here's what we're thinking. Here's how we think we could set this up. They kind of validated it, ran a couple tests for us, and then we had a proof of concept, and we're able to implement that fairly easily. So we really try to look at what we have in place, because it just takes so much time to modify hardware to accommodate the requested changes we have.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when we talk about computer vision and AI. Not a lot of people understand the backbone of that, the architecture piece of that, the GPU cards, the CPU cards. There's a lot of pieces in that puzzle when you talk about computer vision. But you guys mentioned some of the policies and procedures you guys are already doing. What else are you guys doing? Are you doing social distancing, proximity checks? And I know Rick mentioned fever detection, thermal detection, facial recognition, PPE compliance. I mean, what else are you guys doing for your students and staff to kind of make a return, practice back to campus? Chief, let's start with you. What else are you guys doing over there in North Carolina?
Well, one thing we are also doing is we're checking the wastewater in res halls, and we have a process so that when we check the wastewater, we can see if COVID-19 is present, and it has been, and we've utilized the ability to do that to then go into the res halls and quarantine and test students, that kind of thing. So, we're getting some play on that nationally. I think not a whole lot, but it has worked, and it's helped. It's assisted us in some ways. Much of what other schools are doing, we do have a safety check that every member of student, staff, and faculty have to complete every morning online, and submit if they have any symptoms, things of that nature. And then, of course, that could cause them to be placed into quarantine or whatever, that kind of thing, or that they'd be restricted in even coming to campus. And, we're running our EOC every day. and we have been since March. I know quite a few folks are doing that as well. And that's about it for right now.
That's an interesting point. Checking the water. I would never would have thought of that. That's a good point there, Chief, that you brought up. Rick, what about you, man? Anything else additional to COVID-19 that you're doing?
We're also sampling sanitary sewer. We had every faculty, staff, student before returning to campus was COVID tested. And we're planning on doing that, the same thing in the spring. And then we have random testing. I think we were doing 300, now we're doing 600 a week. All of the support staff can have an instant test. If you want to test, you just go and report. We're doing a lot of the science here. So a test is 2 hours. We process it in our own labs, several different styles of testing that I can't tell you the science behind it, but the math is lots of data to make good choices. And currently, really the community around us is exploding with cases, and we're an island that isn't.
Love to hear that. Colorado Mesa University is setting the tone for COVID cases right now. It's telling you guys how it's done. I love that, Rick. Good points there. Danny, let's shift our focus here for a second. Chief spoke about kind of active shooter situations that he went through. I've seen active shooter situations. But let's just talk about security from a broad perspective here for a second. When it comes to security, like I said earlier, I think most people have a reactive approach. I don't think you guys have a reactive approach. I can hear it in your voice and your passion that you guys have that proactive mindset. But what is step one? I'm not talking about COVID-19. I'm not talking about any kind of pandemic right now. What is step one towards security and protecting your students and staff?
I mean, for us, it's making sure those doors are functioning properly, right? Before we start any of the planning, right? It's knowing what you can do and how you can react. For us, the chief mentioned, securing the perimeter of all your buildings, right? We are in the middle of that right now. Even in this downturn where we're really reducing funding, we're still moving forward with finalizing our last few buildings and getting them all the ability to secure them, right? And then it's configuring your system to make sure you can configure lockdowns by buildings and be able to integrate systems, right? That's one of the things we've done is gone through and worked with RS2 and our alert provider. So when we send an alert out, we can automatically secure doors versus having someone to log in and do it, right? So it's reducing touch points, it's increasing integrations, and frankly, it's knowing what you can do and what you're capable of.
Great points there. Physical security has a vital play, especially when we talk about a university in such a broad campus feel. So Fred, what about you? What's step one for you over there in Missouri?
Yeah, for the active shooter, it's really just education. Our chief of police has really been adamant about that. They've created a video to train our students. So it's really step one is outside of our access control system. But I would say for physical security, we have a very close partnership with our university police, and we give them a set of graphical maps to be able to respond with the situational awareness that they have from the camera system and lock down, unlock doors right there in their operations room. Prior to just a few years ago, it wasn't that seamless, and they would have been contacting somebody over here. Hey, can we get this door locked? Or, the reality is they'd send somebody over there with, whatever, a set of keys. And now they're able to do that right from their shop while monitoring the cameras. And so that's key for us.
I'm seeing a common theme here with physical security. I think that's priority number one. And it's interesting you guys bring up that, both Fred and Danny. I had Dan Rothrock on my podcast a month ago. He's the president of Americas for Zenitel. And he talked about the three phases of the security industry. He said the first phase is the access control physical security phase. We've seen that evolve. The next phase of that was the video surveillance phase. So we went from analog to IP. And now what Dan is saying at Zenitel is the third phase is the audio sector. And the future of security is going to center around audio and effective communication solutions. Do you guys agree with that phase that Dan over there at Zenitel is saying? Let's start with Chief. Do you think audio is going to be a vital factor? Because here in the industry, you think it's kind of that next wave?
Yeah, I think it definitely will be. I think they've always struggled in that anyway, trying to figure out how you could get your hands around that and how you can have some ability in different ways to have that. You know, we'll have to see. I mean, I think that's going to be a little bit of a tough one. I will say though that the AI concepts of security cameras, I believe outweigh that. And since we have just completed our phase 1 upgrade of our security cameras on campus, it hasn't even been a week. We've already utilized AI in identification of a subject on campus that, one, had been trespassed before, two, we had pictures of them, so we were able to make those matches with the officers that actually were responding to the call. And based on security camera footage, it was really interesting. This just happened a few days ago, how we did that and how that worked for us, and we were able to go hands on with the guy, and help him make proper decisions and get him off campus and trespass him. But that, I think that's going to be the big wave. And I know there's some on campuses especially. One, they don't like cameras anyway. They really don't like AI. There are some. It's a small number, and we're moving forward with it anyway. And I got to tell you, so we also have a light rail system that travels from the center of the city of Charlotte right to our campus. It's the last stop on the line. So you can imagine at 2 a.m. who comes out to campus for that last stop. And unfortunately, it's a lot of our transients from downtown Charlotte that have unbelievable criminal histories and everything else, and they come out here to campus. And then the train has a policy, they kick everybody off the train, and that's it. So they hand them over to us to deal with, and this is like the end of the road. Now we're working on some plans where the stop before campus is for non-students, but they're not gonna enforce it. That's the thing. See, that's not gonna be enforced. But all I'm saying is having the ability with AI when we deal with all those folks at 2 a.m. and we can see who they are, and it's going to alert us and let us know, hey, that's John Smith, and John Smith was trespassed 6 times, that kind of thing. So that's going to be really useful to us.
Sounds like Chief's not getting any favors over there at that train stop, man. But I'm glad he mentioned AI and computer vision, because AI is a huge factor now in the industry. And it's definitely my sector in the industry. And I like what Chief also said is, he said there's a small percentage of people that don't like cameras on campus. Well, guys and girls, I hate to break it to you, but every university, every supermarket, every gas station, amusement park, they've got cameras watching you, recording you, whether you like it or not. And, it's interesting when you talk about privacy and PII and HIPAA concerns and things of that nature. And when it comes to AI specifically, when we talk about facial recognition, I think this is a stereotype that gets wrong with facial recognition is people think that we automatically know who that person is, who's identified in the camera. But really, that facial recognition system does not know who that person is unless there's a picture of that person imported into the system. So even though you're being watched and recorded, I have no idea who you are, your gender, etc., into the AI system unless that AI system is imported with data that you already know about that person. So I think that's the common misconception about just certain AI in general. And I'm glad Chief brought that up. So Rick, let's start with you on this next question.
Say one thing real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add one piece, and that is I didn't want anybody to think I have a negative view of the light rail. The light rail is tremendous. It is. I've been so coming out to the university, that portion of it just came to fruition a few years ago. But prior to that, we had it running from another town called Pineville to downtown Charlotte. And when my daughters were young, we would ride the train and we'd take them to Panthers games and things like that. And that was all a lot of fun. I'm just saying, light rail is really, it's excellent. It's a wonderful way to travel, especially if you live somewhere along there and you work along the line. I mean, it just is. It's super. But the problem is our light rail isn't like New York City or DC or Chicago, where you have some form of policing. We really have nothing. and anybody can just get on it and ride it, even though you're supposed to pay. I mean, all the honest people are paying, but that's about it. So I did want to just add that caveat that it is an excellent form of travel. It's excellent for inner cities if you can afford it. It's cost us, I think, $7 or $8 billion, something like that. It's an incredible cost, but a lot of it was subsidized by the government. So that's just my piece on that.
No, good points there. Good points there, Chief. Thank you for clarification. And Rick, kind of going off what everyone is saying, these challenges that we face on universities and college campuses. What's the main challenge you see? Is it active shooter? Is it sex offenders? Is it workplace violence? What's some of those challenges that you see?
You know what? I don't have a good answer to that. Really my area of responsibility is physical security. So I'll step back to your previous question. What's the first step? First step is have vision, right? So I have guys with guns that run in and guys with hoses that run in and do their part. And my part is to have a plan, to have the physical elements in place and communicate that plan to them so that everything works for them. So they know how they get in with a key, where they get in with a card. I have the same system that Chief has as it relates to campus lockdown. The substation can lock the whole campus. Lock down, lock out. So all cards stop working except first responders. Same button is in my office. Same button is in the vice president's office. So that locks all of campus. And then I have within each building a button that locks only that building. Some part of that, and to take you back to your, the communication, or I'm going to say communication, that's really kind of my failing. That's where I haven't done a good job of, because it's not exactly my role. I have these systems in place, these pieces in place, and I work hard to communicate with law enforcement and the fire department. I haven't done as good a job with the campus community, what these components do. And just very recently, in some of those conversations, I have these lockdown buttons, and everybody imagined them to function something like a fire alarm pull station. Well, as yet they don't. Within the next couple of months, they will. I'm going to tie them back to an addressable module at the fire alarm dialer so that each time one of those buttons is activated, it'll do something. It'll call me for sure. It'll call the cops. It'll call dispatch. It'll call the vice presidents. And then the next step, as it relates to that potentially, is there a local audible? Do I then tie it into something so that the building occupants know that building is currently in lockdown? And none of this, maybe moving forward, you can design it in a new building, but I'm talking about, okay, what parts do I have? How can I integrate these different things in the existing systems to lock the building, certainly make first responders cards work, all of the cards stop working, notify dispatch, notify the building occupants, and then you got to communicate. You got to train everybody, all the players, that this is what's going on and what then is their role. Probably easier in K-12 than it is in higher ed because everybody's adults. And so you have to give them options and really control them.
Rick, man, I feel like you need some more titles over there in Colorado. I think you need a pay increase too for all the knowledge that you have, man. I think you need to be out there fighting for a higher base increase, right?
And so I would say my biggest challenge is internal, and it's those communication pieces. It's who's fighting for whose budget, right?
Right.
I have the same system that Jeff's talking about with all the lockdown, and I kind of did that on the down low over a long time, just a little bite at a time. How to eat an elephant, a little bite at a time. And you get to the end, by the time it went to administration, they're like, "You did what?" I was like, "Well, yeah." Seemed like a good idea to me. And they've adopted it now, but initially it was a shock.
That's a really good point that Rick just brought up, guys. And I want to skip a question here. It's almost my last question of this podcast, but this question I bring up all the time, especially for end users, is Rick hinted on it. I always feel like security is always priorities at the very bottom. It's always the last, or it's the first thing to get cut off. It's the last thing to get implemented. And I played football at Oklahoma State. I get it. Money's got to go through athletics. I get that point. I'm not saying anything that, but sometimes to Rick's point, why do we need new cameras? Why do we need new access control? Why do we need AI? Whatever it may be. That's the thought process at the top. It's too expensive. It's always the thing to get cut off first. Danny and Fred, why isn't security pushed up the priority ladder? Are you guys seeing that kind of internal battle, like Rick said, or are you guys having kind of a seat at the table to have those discussions? Danny, let's start with you first.
we've gotten more a seat at the table lately. I mean, with what occurred years ago at Virginia Tech and the process that started with the active shooter there and how it affected the state of Virginia and how we need to react to that. And then now it's morphed into incidents that's happened here at Mason where we mistakenly sent out an active shooter alert last summer and how we reacted, or in some cases, how we didn't react. Right. So we've gotten, it's certainly gained more prominence as Mason has matured, right? As we've, we are right close to the DC area. We have a lot of people coming in here, a lot of visitors, and it's an open campus. We let anyone on campus. So now it's, people are realizing more and more, we need to take the steps to make sure we can secure it. And we are starting to get more of that seat at the table. That is becoming more critical and more predominant, where we are seeing that seat and being able to drive some of the decisions and influence construction and the proper postures we need in buildings.
It's great to hear that. I think it just comes down to education, the right people at the top of saying, this is why we need it. This is what could happen, and et cetera. Fred, what about you, man? What are you seeing as kind of pushing security up the priority ladder?
Yeah, security's been a pretty top priority for our administration for a little while now. Our CFO has been very supportive. We just brought on our Avigilon system 3 years ago, and due to its success, it's continued to grow. And then she's also implemented some reoccurring funds every budget period to expand our access control system. So we've been very well supported in that, and I can say it's been easily a top priority for campus in the last 5 years. Yeah.
Love to hear that. And I imagine, Chief, for you, being the chief of police, security, you carry a lot of weight. So whatever Chief says, it's going to happen, I would imagine, right? What do you think?
As a general rule, so I do want to say one thing I have seen is incredible support from our chancellor, for safety and security on campus, and that was evident. I want to say when we did the initial open options with the lockdown ability, I want to say we spent about $4 million just in that endeavor, somewhere around that number. But he had always supported safety and security. We were not at the bottom. We were generally at the top. But it's also important to also have some balance there and not wear out that. You know what I mean? I never went to the chancellor with every single thing that popped up and said, hey, we got to have this, we need that, we need this now. And so I tried to find a good balance, and it worked out because like we've been real fortunate. And like I said, we just finished a security camera upgrade, and it's 2 phases, and we've added more cameras, and every camera that's added now must have the AI capability. You can't add a camera now. We also have a camera management policy, that I manage. And so, you can't just have any kind of camera you want on campus. You have to have exactly what we say, and you have to have the budget dollars to cover it. There's just different ways to find that balance so that you can have consistency throughout campus. And I think that's one of the biggies. I mean, that's just real important.
I love that, mandating kind of that new shift when it comes to security, that this has got to be a mandate for future. You're future-proofing your system now for 5 to 10 years down the road. And kind of my last couple questions here, guys. I want to give some shout out and a spotlight to ACRE. All of you guys are ACRE customers, ACRE clients. Some of you RS2, some of you open options, some of you, obviously Rick is Vanderbilt. So Rick, let's start with you. I talk about relationships all the time here in the security industry. People buy from people, but people buy from people who they trust. So why did you choose Vanderbilt at Colorado Mesa?
I would say I didn't choose it. I inherited it. And it's not that we're stuck with it, but I have a couple thousand legacy Schlage Vanderbilt locks, Magstripe Track 3 locks that would be difficult to manage on any other platform. My hope was that when ACRE acquired RS2 and open options, that they'd meld the platforms into some sort of hybrid, and we'd all enjoy the best of all 3 worlds. And so that's my hope. I don't think that as the end users, we'd be able to drive that. I'd say from the platform side, I've had really very little influence in, I can pay for anything, right? I can call up Vanderbilt and say, hey, I want this functionality added. And if I write a check, they'll do it. Where on the hardware side, on the manufacturer side, we're in the Legion family. I have made some profound changes in some of the design style of some of the hardware, because over time it was junk, and I said, look, I'm never going to buy it again. And say that a couple of times, and pretty soon they're changing it. And I'm signing a non-disclosure agreement saying I'm not going to say that the changes are or whatever. Yeah, I've had a much stronger voice on the hardware side than I have on the platform side.
Good to hear that, Rick. And I think you'll agree, though, just as a general comment, man, do you agree that people buy from people and people buy from people that they trust? Or are you in agreement of that
Absolutely,
terminology?
relationship guy. Yeah.
Great to hear that. And so Fred and Danny, you guys are both RS2 clients. I know you guys are getting sick of Jeff Bransfield. I don't blame you. No, I'm just kidding. Jeff's a great guy, dude. I love Jeff. But you guys deal with the RS2 guys. Why did you guys choose RS2? Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Mercury. Matt Barnett's a huge friend of mine at Mercury. But Danny, let's start with you. Why did you choose RS2?
I mean, frankly, they've been a good partner with us. When we set up our demo system, they made sure they had someone here to walk us through how it worked. When we went live and started a migration, they were right there with us. And frankly, as we've continued to involve with them, it has been a partnership. We can talk to them and go, hey, this is a really great feature, but if you take it a half a step further, this would fit really well here. And let's look at how we can do this differently to support our students and our staff better that use the system. So for us, it really has been a partnership. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to call up RS2 and go, hey, great idea for a feature. What do you think? And be able to see that in 6 months to, well, sometimes never, but sometimes we do. Most of the times we do see some of those features come in, right? It's nice to be able to have those conversations and sort of have your wish list of, hey, it'd be nice if, and be able to get that back and go, oh, now we can really do something. And now we can really improve our processes and our reactions to things because of effectively partnerships, right? It's partnerships with RS2, it's partnerships with our manufacturers that provide parts, right? It's those that communication between these people.
Yeah, feedback is paramount, guys. Feedback. And what manufacturers do with that feedback is critical to sustaining a relationship with the end user itself. So Fred, what about you, man? Why did you choose RS2?
I'd say we chose RS2 just because we were having challenges with a small implementation of another access control platform we had. It just wasn't cutting it from mostly kind of a data, what RS2 calls their data exchange, being able to import card holders and being able to actively assign them access based on different, field criteria. And we were kind of stuck with them from a hardware standpoint. I know you mentioned Mercury hardware. So those were the two reasons. We knew that going with RS2, it wasn't a huge roll of the dice because in theory, if we were ever unhappy, we could choose another program, stick with our Mercury hardware, and we'd be good. But everything they were showing us looked like it would meet our needs. And from a cost standpoint, RS2 was very fair with what we were able to accomplish right off the gate. And then I'll echo what Danny said. It's been a great partnership with RS2. They listen to us. They're available if we have issues, and we've seen them develop quite a bit of new features. Really, is just a direct result of our conversations. So it's been good.
Total cost of ownership is something that RS2 preaches all the time. And I love that you guys said Mercury, because Mercury allows you to interoperate, different technology. And if for whatever reason you're not happy with the ACS system at the time, it's very easy to switch and replace that system. I'm not saying you guys are going to swap RS2 because I'm a huge fan of RS2 myself. I'm also a fan of any kind of ACRE brand as well. So Chief, you're running the open option system. You deal with Charles Johnson and Chuck O'Leary at the open options brand. And you're running the DNA fusion system over there. How are you using that? And why did you choose open options?
Well, a lot of it was just through research and development, and as the other folks have talked about, just having trust and seeing what works best. that kind of thing. So, and working closely with Charles and some of the others, they're real open. They come in, they are open to training. And I make sure, one of the things we do is I want to make sure we reach down into our ranks within the police department so that I have that ability. It's not just a few people here or there in IT positions, things like that that have the understanding on how these systems work and how to use them. And they've been open to all that. So, I can't say enough about that, but certainly trust is important in a company and in a vendor.
Again, yeah, relationships are paramount, guys, and I'm glad you guys brought that up. We kind of cultivated around that kind of discussion. So my last and final question is not really a question. It's just kind of an open question. I want all of you guys to answer this and respond to this. It's just kind of that last piece of advice when it comes to security for the higher ed vertical. What would be your recommendation for security just in general? Mr. Fox, I'm going to start with you, man, just because I love Colorado. What's recommendation number one?
Recommendation number one, have a vision, and then take steps to get there. Kind of a comprehensive worldview. One of the failings, I think, is the microscope. You got to open it up on a campus at least, and then really maybe look bigger than the campus. Community. We have a police department substation on campus, and how you then interrelate with the multiple jurisdictions, communication, standard, naming conventions, mapping. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Have a big plan, communicate it effectively to all the stakeholders.
Have a vision and view it from a holistic lens. I love it, Rick. That's a great piece of advice. Fred, what about you? What's your recommendation for higher ed?
Yeah, I think you hit most of them there. I think it's just important to write out what your goals are before you make some type of an investment, and make sure that the specific solution you're investing into really truly meets your needs. We're using probably about 50% of the functionality of some of these platforms we use just because we don't have a need for the other. But sometimes when you're looking at purchase something, you see all these features and things and get excited about those and then never end up using those, and you sometimes you wind up missing what you're needing. So you really have to look at what your true needs are and prioritize those.
Love it. You got to filter through all the BS, right, Fred? You got to filter all the vaporware technology and only use the stuff that's going to work.
There you go.
Danny, what about you, man? Final piece of recommendation advice.
I mean, for us, it's getting buy-in from everyone. It's having a security plan that everyone's going to sign off on. It's having processes in place that everyone understands. It's things that Rick and Fred have touched on, right? It's that communication with staff, with faculty. That's a big one, right? Making sure faculty understands what's going on and that they are not surprised by a decision that might be made. Right. That's a lot of what it is. It's really about that communication piece.
Effective communication. I 100% agree with that. And last but not least, Chief Baker, let us know your thoughts, man. What's your recommendation?
Never rest on the past investment. Never accept that wherever you are right now today is where you're going to be or where you should be for the next 10 years or 5 years or even 1 year. I think that research and development and having the ability to invest into anything that's new, that's coming and is out there, and trying to lead other schools. For me, that's one of the big things we try to do is help others and show them how you can, win in some of these tough situations. And if you just invest money and say, okay, well, we just spent so much on open options, you shouldn't have to ask us for anything for 2 or 3 years, right? That isn't how it works. You can't rest on your laurels. You've got to keep, I think R&D is probably the most important measure that any campus can take as far as safety and security.
Chief is dropping the mic on us, and it's home of nothing but the truth. That is exactly what this podcast is all about. All 4 of these guys just spoke the truth on this podcast series. So I want to thank all 4 of you for taking your time today to join me in this discussion for the higher ed vertical. And for those that have questions, comments, or concerns, you can email me at info@securityvip.net. Once again, that's info@securityvip.net. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn to see all the recent announcements about our podcast series. You can watch this episode on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And when you're on the road, tune in to Spotify.com to listen to this episode in the higher ed vertical. Thank you all again for hopping on today, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.